Welcome everybody. I'd like to start by welcoming members of the committee and officers and members of the public to our meeting. This meeting is being webcast. The emergency evacuation procedure is as follows. In the event of the alarm sounding again, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and the main front door of City Hall. Turn right, walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. As you'll have heard, there's a fire alarm test 10 o'clock every Friday, which coincides with the start of our meeting. So my name's Councillor Barry Parsons. I'm a councillor for Easton and I'm chair of this committee. And I'd like to begin by asking members of the committee to introduce themselves. Beginning with Richard, if your microphone is working.
It is, Chairman. Councillor Richard Eddy.
Councillor Shabalala, Bristol Central.
Councillor Guy Poltney from Cottam, substituting in today.
Councillor Izzy Russell for Ashley Ward, and I'm also substituting.
Councillor Caroline Gooch for Westbury and Henleys.
Councillor Zoe Pete, Avonmouth and Lawrence Western Ward.
Councillor Rara Grabi from Hale Ward.
And Rob Logan, I'm a councillor for Philwood, and this is my first meeting.
Thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, welcome to Rob and Caroline. It's good to have you here. I will ask members of our officer corps to introduce themselves as and when the relevant item comes up. We'll move on now to agenda item 2, which is apologies for absence and substitutions. As we've heard, apologies have been received from Councillor Lisa Stone. Councillor Izzy Russell is substituting, and apologies have been received from Councillor Jerome Thomas, with Councillor Guy Poltney substituting. Are there any other apologies? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Wonderful. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. So now's the point when I ask committee members, do you have any interest to declare in relation to any of the items of business on the agenda today? No? Wonderful. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. There's one set of minutes to be approved, and that's from the meeting held on Friday the 4th of April 2025. I would like to move these minutes as a correct record. May I have a second?
Second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Now I'm going to ask the committee formally, are you content to confirm these sets of minutes as a correct record to be signed by me as chair? Aye. Great. Thank you very much. We'll move on now then to agenda item 5, which is chair's announcements. This is an opportunity for me to make any announcements that I think are relevant to this committee. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome Sonia Fursland, who's sitting to my right. Sonia is our new Executive Director for Housing, and this is Sonia's first committee meeting in that role. Sonia's a distinguished leader in the housing sector. She's held roles in local authorities as well as in housing associations, and we're extremely grateful to have her on the team. I would say I think that the appointment of an executive level director for housing really demonstrates the commitment that this administration has to putting housing and homes at the highest priority for what we do. A few more announcements. We're launching a consultation today on changes to the home choice allocation system. That will end on Friday the 11th of July at midnight. This proposes making some changes to the banding for people on housing in response to some of the matters that have arisen from the MedAct report on the Barton House and the events surrounding the evacuation there. A few more announcements on housing delivery. This week we launched the Small Sites Aggregator. This is a partnership between cities and central government to unlock small plots of land for development. So Bristol City Council, along with Sheffield and the London Borough of Lewisham, have been selected as pathfinders for this. And we've really been leading this work in partnership with the Mayoral Combined Authority and central government. This is the kind of close working, I think, between this local authority, the Combined Authority and central government that we'll be looking to do more of as we seek to find ways of unlocking opportunities for homes which are desperately needed for this city. And these will be homes that are available at affordable rents for people in need of housing. We've also been moving forward with some housing developments. Redford Crescent in Withywood and Wootton Road in Brislington are two council housing developments that have recently gone forward to planning application phase. So we're really pleased to see those move forward. And I'd also like to mention that some of our recently completed council housing developments have been receiving awards. So at the South West Regional Residential Property Awards, our schemes at Lawrence Weston, New Kingsland and St Peters all won awards in different categories. And I think that speaks to our commitment to providing high quality homes for people in the city. Finally, I'd just like to mention the end of year figures for our Tackling Homelessness programme. So for the first time, we've seen the rate of subsidy loss. That's the amount of money that we lose on the central government funding for providing accommodation for homeless households. Subsidy loss has reduced for the first time, and that programme has delivered £4.8 million of savings against a target of 2.7 million over the last year. So that's dramatically exceeded its target. And we've also seen a very dramatic reduction in the number of families housed in hotels and other shared accommodation. So that was down from 160 families at the start of the civic year in 2024 to just 9 families in April of this year. So that's real progress and something that will mean better outcomes for families that become homeless in our city. So, that's the end of my announcements. So we're going to move on now to public forum. Now, up to 30 minutes are available for public forum. Questions and replies were circulated to committee members and were published on the website in advance of the meeting. Each questioner is permitted to ask up to 2 oral supplementary questions in total, if they wish. Supplementary questions must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. So entirely fresh questions on other subjects aren't permitted. Depending on the content of the supplementary questions, it may be necessary for a follow-up reply to be sent to the questioner. Thank you very much. So I'm going to begin by calling members of the public who've asked questions to ask them if you would like to ask any further supplementary questions. So as a reminder, you'll have 2 supplementary questions. Your original question and the reply have been published on the website. So I'm going to begin by calling on Fadimo Farah. Fadimo, do you have any supplementary questions?
I was disappointed that I didn't get the answer of the question that I asked. My question was specifically about whether the emails and other messages would be available for the investigation, for Barton House investigation, as he was the main person who was in charge in the council at that time.
Do you have a supplementary question, Fadimo?
Yes, my question is, do I need to, is those emails and messages will be available for the investigation, the Barton House investigation?
Okay, so I think, so that's kind of a restatement of your original question, isn't it? And I think officers have done their best to answer about that. What I would say, I think, is that the terms of reference of that that review haven't yet been set, and that will be something that will be done along with residents. And I would expect that any evidence that's necessary for that review to go forward should be made available to it. So I realise that's not perhaps a kind of the answer to your question that you're looking for, but I really don't know the sort of what specific evidence will be required for that for that review to take place yet.
Well, he was the one who was in charge in the council. My question is, if the investigation, because the emails and messages have been deleted, how are they going to find it? That's the question I want to find out.
I think we might have to go away and consult with colleagues on the answer to that one, because I'm really not sure myself about what the retention policies for the council's email systems and that sort of thing. So I think that would be something that colleagues who aren't currently in this room would have to answer. Fatima, do you have another supplementary question? I think maybe you've asked one, but the first was a restatement of your original question. So if you'd like to ask a further question, please do. No. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on then to our next question. That's Councillor Christine Townsend. Christine, you had two questions on the private rented sector. Do you have supplementary questions that you'd like to ask?
Yes, please. So my first one is in relation to the Hampton Road case. So this landlord pleaded guilty. It was a pattern of behaviour, and the things that this landlord did does relate to conditions on the HMO licensing licence. So I think my question for Chair and Committee is, if a guilty plea from an HMO landlord holder is not enough to trigger a fit and proper person review test, what would be?
Would you like to answer this?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to answer that. This will be one that I'll need to take away. I think on the face of it, the question you ask is quite reasonable, given that there has been a case and someone has pled guilty without knowing the full details of what they've pled guilty to. It's difficult for me to offer a review, and Tom Gilchrist, who is our head of service for this area, unfortunately isn't here, but I'm very happy to take this question away and provide a full response to you in terms of what the criteria would be for triggering a fit and proper person review for someone who is currently licensed as a landlord by BCC.
Do you have another supplementary question, Christine?
Yeah, my second is in relation to data, really. So I'm not interested in officers going away and putting new data sets together, but what I am interested in is the latest set of data that looks at the number of licences that were applied for. I mean, it might be 12 months or 24 months, whatever. The number of HMO licences that were applied for, the number that were refused at point of application, because the fit and proper person test was applied and they failed it, and the number within that same period that this council attempted or succeeded to revoke as a result of the fit and proper person test being applied and that person having shown to be failed by within their practices.
Again, if it's okay, I'm very happy to take that request away and to pull together that data for you and share it.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to. Yeah, thanks. Do I get three?
Do you have a further question? We haven't got that many questioners today, so I think we can flex a bit.
Okay, so I mean, my third question is again in relation to the fit and proper person test. So there is guidance that the council will use to put that policy together. If it's found that the practices of HMO licensee holders is deemed by this chair and committee to be so egregious that the policy doesn't fit around that, can you call the policy back and tighten it if you consider that the current policy doesn't serve the public, as we are all here to serve the public and not private landlords.
Thanks, Christine. Sonia, do you want to start? And then
Yes,
there's a question for the chair as well, so I'll answer that as well.
very happy to take a look at the policy, and indeed, when the policy was drafted, any changes in legislation subsequent to that policy being drafted, or indeed any changes in case law that would require a redraft, and very happy to review and take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. And yeah, likewise, I would expect that the policy of this nature would be kept under reasonably frequent review. And so I think if there are lessons to be learned from the case that you've referenced, I think we should make sure that the policy is reviewed in that light. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. So our next public question then is Dan Ackroyd. Dan.
Yeah, I've got a supplementary to my question 6. Thanks for the pointing me to the appendices. It will take me a while to go through them. My understanding is that the only report that lays out the future work that needs to be done is the risk report with the mitigating actions in it. But it seems that that doesn't contain all of the known work items related to the IT system. How is this committee meant to be informed about the total scale of the work that is needed and so be able to gain insight into how many years it is going to take to fix this mess?
Thank you, Dan. So there is there's a housing IT transformation program board which considers what's required to be done in order to implement the new IT system and make sure that we have the right data systems. I am conscious that board hasn't reported directly to this committee. So that is something that I think we should probably take away and look at getting a report to the committee. Is that something that we'd be able to do in reasonable time, Sonia, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm obviously recently appointed and will be taking over the chair of that board. Given as we're getting so close now to the implementation date of what you rightly acknowledge is a really important piece of work for us, is that we have appointed somebody to bring some external eyes on, just to make sure that all of the areas that need to be covered are covered, to understand any risks in relation to the implementation and our ability to go live and to make a success of the implementation. As implementing large IT systems have been fraught with issues, but actually on the face of it, it would appear that the programme has had a programme board throughout, that the scope of the project is well known, but we are now getting very close to implementation date, and I'm particularly very close to some of our other systems actually going offline. So we are just bringing in that somebody external just to give us that additional assurance. And I feel like actually that would be something that would be helpful to come to this committee to provide assurance externally on the programme itself and our ability to deliver it successfully.
Thank you. Dan, do you have further supplementary?
Yes, I do. I've got a comment that information should have been at this committee 12 months ago at the very least. And it's a failure that it's taken this long to get to it. A second failure is Ms. Farrow's first question, the answer to her first question. She asked very clearly whether the emails would be available to the inquiry. She did not ask what you thought might be the terms of reference to the inquiry. She has come here today seeking to get an answer. You've just repeated the same evasive answer. Please, can she have a clear answer of whether the emails will be available to an inquiry if they need them?
Thanks, Dan. I think, as I said in my response to Fatima, I don't have that information. I don't know, what emails are retained. So we're going to go away and we're going to find that out.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have a further supplementary? I think we do have a bit more time.
It was along the lines of when you're going to start making sure officers are actually going to start answering questions, but I don't expect a response. So.
Okay, thanks, Dan. We're going to move on then to public forum statements. We've received 5 statements to this meeting, and 2 people have indicated that they would like to speak to them. The first of those is Fatima Farah.
After 2 years of campaign, I've had my first sunny holiday. I came back yesterday. I know some officers would like Barton House situation to just go away, but it's not going away until we get the answers that we need. And it's a failure for Bristol City Council, what happened to my community. I'm not saying all the officers are bad. Like, I've worked with Mark Kemp, who has been very good. I'm very rarely to embrace some officers. My understanding is that local authorities, including the council, have legal and ethical duty to retain records related to emergency incidents for longer periods than at standard business as usual. Communications is ensured to accountability, enabled through the reviews and support any future inquiry. Oh, sorry, am I reading the... Okay. Sorry, it's long. I've had a long night, but what I'm saying is we need Barton House investigation to go through honestly, and we need all the emails and messages available for the investigation. Barton House situation is not going away until we get the answers that we need. The officers need to stop undermining Barton House residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. And our next public statement is from Dan Aykroyd. Dan.
The response to Ms Farah's question is evasive and offensive. The question was not how an inquiry is going to be established, it was are the emails going to be available or not. Get a grip on your committee and get an answer. This bit in particular was offensive. This is not, from reading from the answer, this is not an inquiry into the working activities of the Mayor of Bristol. Correct. It'd be an inquiry into how this council cocked up an evacuation that led to people being traumatised because of the incompetence of the people involved. Full council was cancelled by 2:30. There was no information at all given to residents until 7 p.m. The evacuation didn't really start until past 8 p.m, past kids' bedtime. What the hell was going on all day? Did anyone in the Mayor's office try to prevent the evacuation from happening? I mean, it was inconvenient, wasn't it? The day of the Mayor's big speech in Kigali, in Rwanda, that he had this evacuation going on. I have reason to suspect that trying to manage an evacuation while hobnobbing into conference is likely to lead to delays in making decisions and communicating with the public. This council needs to hold a proper inquiry and not one set up to sweep things under the rugs, because £10 million was spent that possibly could have been avoided, and because the council inflicted harm through its incompetence. Councillor Parsons, you need to get a grip on your committee. You look like you don't have full control over officers. Just the last bit, shutting down the Housing Management Board and not having a replacement in place until close to 18 months later looks like an absolutely disgusting decision.
Okay, thank you, Dan. That's the end of public forum now. So we're going to move on to agenda item 7, which is the annual business report. This report presents to the committee the membership, the chairing arrangements, the terms of reference and the meeting dates of this policy committee for the 2025 to 26 municipal year. This is a non-key decision and the report is for noting. I'm now going to invite Rose Cross, Policy Committee Officer, to introduce and outline the report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the membership of the Homestead Housing Delivery Policy Committee for 25-26. It notes the appointment of yourself, Councillor Barry Parsons, as the Chair of the Committee. It notes the appointment of Councillor Richard Eddy as the Vice Chair of the Committee, the terms of reference for this Policy Committee, and also the meeting dates for 25-26. Thank you.
Do members have any questions for Rose or us on that report? No? Thank you very much. In that case then, what I'm going to do now is to read out the recommendation of the report. And that is that the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee notes the membership of the Homes and Housing Delivery Policy Committee for 2025-6, notes the appointment of Councillor Barry Parsons as the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Policy Committee for the 25-26 year, notes the appointment of Councillor Richard Eddy as the Vice Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Policy Committee for 25-26, and notes the terms of reference of this committee. Finally, that it notes the meeting dates for the Homes and Housing Delivery Policy Committee for 25-26. Thank you very much. Can I take it that those are all duly noted? Thank you. Agenda item 8 then is the Finance Report Update. This report presents to the committee the Housing and Landlord Services financial forecast at period 12 against the approved budget at the end of May 24. This is a non-key decision and the report is for noting. I'm going to invite Martin Johnson, who is the Finance Business Partner for Housing, to introduce and outline the report. The Policy Committee team are going to display Martin's finance presentation on the screen. This has also been published online and circulated to members if you prefer to look at it on your own screen.
Thank you, Chair. The Period 12 Finance Update reports on the revenue and capital provisional outturn positions of both the General Fund and the HRA. The General Fund revenue shows a provisional overspend of 2.9 million with a capital underspend of 5.7 million against a revised budget of 23.9 million. The HRA revenue provisional outturn position is a 2.4 million overspend. I will come on to the reasons for this movement later from what we've seen previously, and a capital underspend of 6.5 million against a revised budget of 146 million. The reasons for the forecast over and underspends are detailed in the report, and I will take any questions on them later. Whilst the main report focuses on the forecast position at a point in time, it does not comment on the movement and direction of travel between reporting periods. This presentation discusses these movements between reporting periods. As a reminder, when we get to the slides, the top part of the slide shows the overall movement in forecast for the service, and the bottom part of the slide shows where within these services the movements have arisen. Could we have the next slide, please? General Fund revenue between period 10 and period 12 has seen an overall movement of a reduction in the region of 0.5 million. This is as a result of small increases against forecast subsidy loss due to demand being slightly higher than anticipated towards the end of the year, offset by a reduction against licence and salaries and increased licence and income. There are no risks or opportunities to report in this period, as any which have materialised have now been included within the ledger, and any which did not materialise have been removed from the log. Next slide, please. General Fund capital has seen a marginal increase of approximately 0.5 million between the two reporting periods. This is as a result of an increase in DFG adaptations, which is a demand-led service, offset by a reduction of 0.2 million in the housing delivery programme due to slippage on a number of schemes. Next slide, please. The HRA provisional outturn shows an improvement of 9.6 million in period 12 compared to period 10. However, as detailed in paragraph 28 of the committee report, this is as a result of a number of technical year-end adjustments not yet having taken place. These transactions related to the treatment of capital receipts and the transfer to reserves. Once these transactions are taken into account, the HRA would show a slight increase in the overspend to 12.5 million. The main reasons for the increase in the overspend over period 10 are due to increased voids and the impact of slippage in housing delivery, as well as a higher repair cost, offset by corporate overheads being slightly lower than previously anticipated. The reduction in depreciation reflects the impact of the period 13 transactions, which had not yet been taken place. With regards to the modulus write-off, whilst reviewing the financing of the capital programme for 24-25, it became clear that the way this investment was funded in previous years, i.e. through revenue contributions, means that the impact had already been felt and therefore no further action was necessary. As with the General Fund, there are no risks or opportunities to report at period 12. Next slide, please. Housing revenue capital has seen a total movement between the periods of a negligible 0.5 million reduction, being the result of quicker spend on a number of home improvement programmes, offset by further slippage within the development programme. So, next slide, please. So, in summary, the position reported at provisional outturn is a 12.5 million overspend once period 13 technical adjustments are taken into account within the HRA. It is, however, worth noting at the time of writing the report, capital accounting and pension adjustments were still outstanding. There is therefore a likelihood that the position will move further on final outturn. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Martin. So now I'm going to invite members of the committee to ask questions and make any comments that they would like to. Just a reminder, please, that, please go through the chair, and if you have follow-up questions or anything, again, still go through the chair. Thank you. And I'm going to start with Councillor Eddy.
Thank you. Martin, you're always very good. You do almost idiot-proof, actually, presentations, which is always very wise because, in my view, elected members are not very bright, certainly in my case. Could I just ask a question regarding the overspend on the acquisitions programme? Now, this is £400,000, which in total scheme is small bear, I concede. I've had a number of acquisitions in my ward, which I understand, of course, and that support. But at least one of them, and I'm not saying we should be looking at the lowest cost expenditure, was quite relatively, for my neck of the woods, expensive property. And I'm just wondering what some things clearly, like our homelessness overspend, and various slippage in the affordable housing programme, is we can hardly really affect. But surely the issue of when and for what we actually spend money on the acquisitions programme, we can. So why is there this overspend there?
Thank you, Chair. So there could be a number of reasons for that overspend. When we pulled that budget together, it was on the assumption that we would buy a blend of different property sizes. So however many 2 beds, however many 3 beds, however many 4 beds, and that was determined by the need for those property types. We also set assumptions on the purchase price of properties, but also the level of works that might be required for them. We have limits on what we are allowed to spend on a property and what we are allowed to spend on the works, because if we go above those limits, they become unviable and we will not proceed. So it could be that during the course of the year, we have bought more 4 beds than we thought we would during this year. But next year we will buy less. The budget is the budget, and the number of properties we are going to buy is unchanged. It's when these properties, we're sort of largely influenced by the market as well, as to when properties come on that are suitable for us to appraise and then proceed or otherwise with.
Thank you, Martin. I think it would be a good idea at some point if we bring some information to this committee on the acquisitions programme and how that is going, the property types that we're buying, and how far advanced it is, that sort of thing. Councillor Shabalala next.
I'd like us to start just by all the positive news that you mentioned earlier on. And firstly, the introduction of Sonia. Thank you very much for joining. It's long awaited to kind of have your support moving forward. And, you know, going on what you had said, Chair, it's really welcomed that there's a review on home choice, the banding, obviously taking lessons from what we've heard from Barton House and other residents, those either on temporary accommodation and so forth, making sure that the home choice service is fit for purpose and it reflects the needs of our communities, those that are disabled, mental health, overcrowding, that therefore the recording matches the needs of the people, and therefore they are prioritized in the most effective way. So it definitely shows that we are listening and we're making those suitable adjustments. So I'd like to say congratulations, a big one to the team on that, and let's make sure that this consultation gets maximum engagement. Looking at the last consultation, we didn't have as much engagement. Now, for all the people that we hear complaining, finding themselves not in the right band and so forth, we need to make sure that this consultation reaches all those are intended to feed into it. So can we have the reassurance that we will have a high engagement on this kind of consultation? And equally, it's not only just to the officers, it's also to the ward and the councillors to make sure that their residents are equally engaged, are informed, so they can really feed into this. So that one is really good. Additionally, what you've mentioned, Chair, about the reduction of the HRA and the subsidy, that is a huge improvement. So clear, it shows that the ideas that have been put forward this year's administration are actually, saving, and that's the saving that we need. On a bit more of a dimmer light is that when we look at the potential overspend on most of the projects, as mentioned in your report, we may find ourselves not necessarily meeting our, interest cover ratio, which is really important if we aim to borrow, or should they be further large projects with issues. I would like us to put, at some point, to really think about a community promise. The promise that says that we will not raise our social housing rents on the basis that we have more spillage. We need to manage the spillage better. We need to manage the spillage better. The overspend on projects has a knock-on impact on rents, and we need to make sure that we manage those spillage, so therefore we don't pass on some of that issues to tenants. Maybe I'm incorrect on that part, but I'd like your suggestion. But I just want our residents to feel reassured that if there's additional expenditure on things that are within council control or support, especially when it comes to contracts and delivery of programs, that we don't increase the rent on their side. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shabalala. On your first point about the consultation on home choice, it's not strictly relevant, of course, to the finance report, but we are looking to maximise the engagement with that, and in particular, we're looking to make sure that we have a representative range of responses to it. And to that end, we're doing a lot of engagement around it, including some in-person events. Thank you. Martin, would you like to respond on the Councillor Shabalala's second point?
If I could, yes. So when we talk about overspends on capital, what we mean is that it's an overspend this year, not an overspend of the entire programme. The budget will remain the same. There wouldn't be additional budget. To take your point on raising rents, we wouldn't raise rents just because we've got a bit of movement and a bit of fluidity within the capital programme. The final point on ICR is relevant, and it's especially relevant going into 26-27 when, as we know, our interest cover ratio covenant is very, very tight. And if we do have a lot of capital spend brought forward in that year, then we could be at risk of breaching the ICR, which is why, as I've said before to this committee and to PCCB, we need to be really, really tight on our forecasting, and we need to be really, really diligent on making sure that we don't have significant amounts of forward and reducing backward slippage as well, because that reduces the amount of rent that we can get in, or delays the rental income as well.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like to invite Mark Kemp to come in on this point as well.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to provide some reassurance around rent setting. So we set our rents according to government legislation, which is CPI plus 1%, I think, for September. So that's how we set our rent. So it's just to provide some reassurance around that policy.
Thank you. Councillor Logan, you're rather silhouetted against the window for me, so I can't see you very well, but I thought I saw your hand go up. Am I right?
No.
Okay, that's all right then. We'll go to Councillor Pulteney next then.
Thank you, and apologies, Chair. This is my first time on this committee. It's also my first time on any policy committee at all. So, yeah, apologies if I'm asking very stupid or obvious questions. Just one observation I wanted to make in relation to my colleague's question, but it used to be the case, this is a very long time ago now, when I was more involved in the housing policy brief, that there was always a risk over a multi-year capital project that if officers were to get ahead, as in were to make more progress than was anticipated, that could very often be captured as an in-year overspend. And of course, very often it would actually save money over the course of the project. I just hope that officers would never be shy about coming to the committee and saying, we've done really well here, but that's why we've got a small in-year overspend. So I'd just throw that out there. It's always good to know or to have that context. The other was just in relation to the housing revenue accounts provisional outturn. And apologies, it's the item referred to as depreciation and bad debt provision. And as a newcomer to the committee, I was just hoping for a very quick outline, because that strikes me as being two quite odd things to bunch together, possibly not in financial terms, but in terms of what the committee would need to take from that. If it would be possible just to break down what that is, why they're together, and whether either sort of side of it in particular was responsible for the variance in outturn.
Thank you very much, Councillor Portney. Martin, are you able to respond on the point about overspend and about debt?
So on the depreciation and bad debt provision, I think it might be better to take it out of this committee meeting if we're going to get into the technicalities of housing finance reporting on that matter. Sorry, what was the other point? On the slippage, you mean?
It was about the opposite. In fact, it was about about progress on projects being reported as overspends when it was in fact faster progress than had been anticipated. Is that right?
Yes, and you're right. The thing that causes us problems, capital spend is very, very fluid, especially when it's a big development scheme, where to a degree in the hands of the developers and the site itself. It doesn't take much to find something on a site that that delays your spend. That in turn, as I've just said, delays the rental income. If we can deliver a new scheme faster, we would of course aim to do that. The issue that we've got at this particular point in time is that the finances of the HRA are so tight that we may not necessarily be able to bring a lot of capital spend forward, because it would lead to more borrowing, higher interest costs, and a breach of one of our covenants. But in an ordinary world, yes, you would want to get the money out the door as soon as possible, get those units up and get people housed.
Thanks very much. Guy, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you very much. And just in terms of, apologies, depreciation and bad debt provision in this context, what does that refer to?
Could we take that out of this?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I understand. Thanks.
I think that might be a point for how we report that in future finance reports. Sonia, did you want to come in on that?
So I'm going to give a kind of an overview around depreciation and bad debt, and I think it's helpful that Martin will come back and give a more detailed response in relation to it. But generally, and I'm using generalisations because I'm still relatively new here, is that for bad debt is that you would look at the level of indebtedness, so your rent arrears essentially, and then you would take a view on what percentage of those rent arrears would become bad debt, because you would hope over a period of time that some of those monies would be repaid, be it rent arrears or indeed service charges. And obviously in terms of depreciation, normally, and hopefully Martin will correct me if I'm wrong here, but we have on our balance sheet a number of capital assets that we own within our homes, such as lifts and other items, and they will probably be depreciated because over time they will need replacing and the value of them will depreciate. So we take account of that on the balance sheet through depreciation. But it's a fair question around why we would put bad debt and depreciation together on the one line, because they are indeed two different things, and we will take that away.
Thanks very much. So I've got Councillor Peat next, and then after Councillor Peat, I've got hands from Councillor Eddy and Councillor Gooch, and then I would be proposing to sort of move us on to the next item. So if anyone's got any other points they'd like to make, please let me know. Thank you, Sis. So, Councillor Peat.
So The budget is technically balanced, but it is highly vulnerable. While the HRA capital programme and the General Fund capital programme are in an underspend, the HRA overview and the General Fund overview are in an overspend. So I am worried that sustained overspends in temporary accommodation and compliance work could mean future budgets are only a stone's throw away from being in an overspend overall. So my question is, how are we going to safeguard against this risk?
Thank you, Councillor Pete. And yes, of course, I mean, I think, we are in a, we're in a very vulnerable financial position for many reasons. And taking the General Fund, for example, our Tackling Homelessness programme has done a huge amount to reduce the amount of subsidy loss and therefore reduce the risk to the council. But we are we're trying to respond to circumstances that in many cases are outside of the council's control, and they include rises in homelessness, which are driven by wider economic forces and indeed by central government policy. So there are risks to us that we are always working to attempt to mitigate, but a lot of those will depend on decisions that the government makes over the next few months and years as well. I'm going to go over to Martin, though, to respond on risk of this.
The only other thing I would add to that is, I mean, that's absolutely correct, but when we set the budget and the medium-term financial plan, we do take account of these risks and factor them into the budget. So whilst, if I take the HRA as a prime example, from period 2, 24-25 onwards, we were reporting an overspend. And it was clear that a number of those overspends were going to last longer than that just this past financial year. They have actually been included in the business plan going forward, as well as actions to mitigate against those risks. So the impact, the impact of some of these things is within the budgets, but there are always additional risks that come along.
And we will be moving on to talk about the corporate risk management report in the next item as well. So I'm going to go to Councillor Gooch next.
We should be aiming for, but fundamentally, I think the appetite really will be driven by this committee. And also obviously by the wider council, the corporate strategy, our own housing strategy. We're two of the major pieces of work that we really need to do relatively quickly is our asset management strategy, which will really set out our approach and our ambition for the quality of our homes, and then also our resident voice strategy, which again will set out with our residents their ambition and our ambition to improve services, to do better and to be better. And I know, having spent a lot of time, particularly with colleagues and with members over the last few weeks and met residents, I think that's very much a shared ambition.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on now then. And for the clarity of the committee and the benefit of members of the public, I'm going to read out the recommendation of the report, which is that the committee notes the report on the period 12 forecast for housing and landlord services. May I take it that that's noted? Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 9, we have the corporate risk management report for quarter 4. This report presents an update on current significant strategic risks relevant to the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to achieving the Council's objectives as set out in the Corporate Strategy 2022 to 2027, and it summarises progress in managing the risks and actions being taken as at quarter 4 2024-25. I'm going to invite Sonia Fersland, Executive Director for Housing, to introduce and outline the report. Sonia.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I just check, Councillor Jude, are you okay to hear me? Yeah, great. As Chair has just outlined, this is really a report for noting around the corporate risks which relate to the housing service. There will be a number of other risks which will sit within the service risk register, but essentially what we're doing here is we're focusing in on our most significant risks, which are the ones which make it onto the corporate risk register. You'll see that we have 1 critical risk and 3 high. And what I'll just draw your attention to is, as we talk through some of those, is our current position in relation to them. Just finding them in the paper. Excuse me a moment. I'm a little bit slow. So if I start first with our critical risk, which is risk item CRR60, which is the failure of the HRA stock to meet the landlord statutory obligations, including decent homes and the consumer standards. As you'll all be aware, this risk has already materialised following a self-referral to the regulator back in, I believe, April 2024, and then subsequently, as a result of that self-referral in July 2024, actually we received a regulatory judgment from the regulator which rated us as C3. Obviously, our ambition, as stated, should be to C1. And so really, in terms of managing those risks, one of the key things that we've done is we've brought additional resources to bear and changed the way that we work to really focus in on the consumer standards. We have a consumer standards board, and what we see over the period, and I think is reflected in this report, particularly in the appendix when you can see the mitigating actions that we're taking, is that we are seeing some improvement, most critically in our data. We are moving very much to getting to what we need to do is get to a point where we are doing our stock condition surveys regularly and routinely, so that over a 5-year period we have data which is no more than 5 years old. And that shouldn't just be in relation to our stock condition surveys, but also HHSRS, which is the Housing Health and Safety Landlord Rating System, which will look at the safety of our homes specifically, and indeed the SAP rating, which is the energy performance of our homes. So we're making significant progress in relation to data, and that's really critical to driving our improvement actions and indeed our spending priorities and the development of our asset management strategy, which should set that out. But we still have some challenges, and the Consumer Standards Board is very focused on delivering for those, and we meet regularly with the regulator of social housing as well, so that we can demonstrate to them that we are making progress, and the next step hopefully for us will be to move up to C2. The risk itself has remained static, and that's because it has materialised. I wouldn't expect to see the risk score come down until such time as actually we achieve C2. So all of these actions are in train to get us there, but fundamentally, as the risk has already materialised, I wouldn't expect to see any movement until our grading with the regulator improves. I'll move on, if I may, to CRR48, which is maximising the delivery of affordable housing. I think the team are doing good work actually in what is a very difficult market at the moment, particularly in terms of rising costs. Bristol is a very expensive city to build in, not just land values. And what's been really great for me to see is the creativity around our approach to developing homes in a very challenging market, in particular how we use our own homes. We have Gorham Homes, which obviously is our own fully owned council subsidiary, which is building a significant number of homes. I think I've currently got about 500 homes on site, excuse me. But also with the announcement, but also with the announcement this week of the work that we have been piloting with the support of Lloyds Bank, with Sheffield and other authorities and central government around those small sites aggregators, and really looking at, particularly for us, this is really kind of critical work for us because we don't have large parcels of land. So what we have to do is be creative about the land that we do have. And actually, if we accumulate all of those small lands, including some of our derelict garage sites, actually, which are an eyesore within our communities, we can deliver much needed homes. So I think, actually, having reflected on the static nature of this score, I feel that maybe we could be a little less risk-averse in the way that we approach the scoring on this one, because we do have a very effective strategic housing team. I think probably what it also reflects, though, is a change in relation to our RP partners. Like us, they are having to look at their available funding, and they are investing much more in their existing homes, same approach that we are taking, to meet the requirements of new regulatory obligations and indeed new legislation, most notably the Building Safety Act. And what we're seeing in particular in a city really where density is key because we've got limited land is, I think, a nervousness from the RPs around building anything over 18 metres because they're not familiar often with managing and maintaining high-rise residential buildings, but the additional requirements on the Building Safety Act is something I think they need to get to grips with. But I'll be meeting some of the chief execs and the development directors with Louise Davison, who's our head of service here, to understand what we in Bristol can do to encourage more house building. But fundamentally, I think there's some good work being done there. In terms of the Building Safety Act, the risk there in terms of CR52, I think it's very much linked to the first risk that we discussed. And as I've said, I think making improvements in our data is going to be really critical there to enable us to determine how to prioritise our funds. We've made some structural changes as well within Property in Place. We have Claire Gibb with us, who's our interim transformation director, but essentially she's the director for our property within the housing service. And we brought in some additional leadership capacity as well at head of service level to really help us drive forward improvement. And I would hope, again, that this is another one of those risk areas where we should, once those changes start to be implemented, when we start to see some outcomes from those changes, that actually we can see that score reduce. And then the final one, I think we've already discussed around some of the success. I have to say I've been really impressed with the work that we're doing around homelessness, particularly in relation to subsidy loss, the innovation and the creativity around our leasing approach, the General Fund funding the purchase, £33 million for the purchase of properties, which will help us significantly with subsidy loss. And it's great to see subsidy loss coming down. But also, I think, more importantly, the crucial thing is it's really having an impact. And actually, we are meeting our targets currently in relation to families not spending more than 6 weeks in hotel accommodation. And really, that's got to be the focus for us. Clearly, as a local authority, the money is important because, obviously, if we're spending money, we're losing money on subsidy loss, we're not able to invest it in other more pressing matters. But critically, there are families and individuals who are being benefited from the work that we are doing. So again, I'm hoping that this is one of the static scores that we should be able to see reduce as the innovation really starts to bring good outcomes for us.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm now going to invite questions and comments from members of the committee, and I'm going to start with Councillor Gooch.
Thank you. There are 222 properties still awaiting RAC inspections. When can we expect them to be surveyed? And then I've got one other question, which is about the CRR 37, which is the last item you just mentioned, the Tackling Homelessness Programme. One of the options mentioned has been leasing modular housing. Have you got some information on the cost effectiveness of that? And leasing versus buying? Obviously, I guess the sites are the most important thing, but is there some information on the costs of that and the cost effectiveness of it versus other types of housing?
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. So shall we start with the question about RAC? Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm acutely aware that these inspections are outstanding and are procuring appropriate resource at pace. The inspection schedule will be a visual inspection with a double press, and if that inspection highlights the need for more destructive surveys, obviously we will let the people that live there know. So I'm hoping to start the visual inspection midsummer.
Thank you, Claire. It occurs to me as well that we should probably try and expand acronyms where possible. So, Claire, would you be able to maybe briefly explain what's meant by RAC?
Thank you, Chair. RAC is reinforced aerated, and I can't remember what the other A stands for, concrete. It's effectively a lightweight concrete that was primarily used for large spans and throughout the UK, it is more prevalent in low-rise waffle build where you have spine walls with a roof over the top, and schools and hospital construction. However, it has been found in lift motor rooms on the top of high-rise buildings and has been found in plant rooms. But at this moment in time, we have to rule it out for all of our stock. That's why I want to proceed at pace. And obviously, if I find some, we'll have to come back with a plan with what we're going to do about it.
Thank you, Claire. And Councillor Gooch, your second question was about leaseback arrangements for modular homes. Sonia, would you like to speak to that?
So I will have to go away and come back in terms of some of the detail around the financing of the value, the cost of leasing as opposed to the cost of purchasing. I guess to a certain extent it will depend on what is available in terms of whether somebody wants to sell it or somebody wants to lease it. What I can say more broadly in terms of the cost of modular, having actually it's very timely, I went out to see Z-Pods at Inns Court this week and Edaroth, a site that we have over in Hartcliffe. And the costs of actually building modular can be slightly more expensive. However, the build time is significantly quicker. So at the moment, for example, at Edaroth on the site, a very small constrained site as well with difficult access, they are currently doing the groundworks and they will have completed those homes in September. So in terms of the building and actually then the benefit of getting people into homes more quickly, there's a significant cost benefit there. But in terms of the cost of leasing versus purchasing, I will have to go away and see if I can find some detail on that for you.
Yeah, we'll get some more figures about the about our modular leaseback schemes because they are they're an interesting and very promising avenue, I think, for this council to provide homes for people. As Sonia said very swiftly, using land that where the arrangement is that the modular provider continues to own the unit itself, which they lease to us, but it's erected on land that's owned by us. Our upfront costs are very low because we're not buying the modular units, and then it helps to eliminate subsidy loss because those units are then managed by a register provider, and at the end of the lease period, those units can be retained on site or they can be moved elsewhere. So it's a flexible option as well for sites where we might have future aspirations for their use as part of a larger regeneration or redevelopment project. Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Gooch?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know, I didn't see it in the detail, but how many units are we talking about at the moment like this, and is it something that could expand over time if it's successful?
Yeah, we'll get the figures for you, but it's I think, Claire, do you have the exact figures, because we are expanding from what was initially a kind of pilot phase to many more units now.
Thank you, Chair. We've started discussions as to the viability and the value for money in terms of whole life housing from inception right the way through to removal. I think, and I need to check, please may I take it away, that my colleague in housing delivery is writing a paper that I will help co-author and come back to the committee. But can I take that away? And if there isn't a paper, we'll make sure we get you the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Peat next.
So I just have some questions regarding clarity for the risk Charlie Romeo 48. I'm sorry if it's in the report and I've just not seen it. How many affordable homes were delivered in 24-25?
So we are going to be getting a full report on affordable homes delivery for the 24-25 year at our next committee meeting. So I think it might be, if it's all right, it might be best to wait until then to discuss that, because that's going to have a breakdown of the delivery by different house types and different.
Do you know if you've
providers.
met the target and what the target was?
Again, I think that all that detail is going to be coming in the report that we'll be seeing at our next committee meeting.
So we don't have that information at all now, just as a quick clarity check.
So it's produced by the housing delivery team as an end of year report, and that's the usual way that works, because there can be a lot of challenges in actually sort of verifying the figures until you get to the end of year.
But
So we're going to be getting those figures in detail at our next meeting, so it's probably best to discuss them then.
Sonia doesn't have those figures to hand.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
All right, no worries.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eddy.
Originally, I didn't plan to speak to this report because, like you, Chairman, I've seen it twice before in quizzed officers, but I was inspired by the Exec Director's reference to housing delivery, and what's made a huge impression on me, I mean, over the last 6 months, I'm sure, like the Chairman, I've heard officers, even up to the Director of Economy of Place, say Bristol is one of the 10 most expensive cities in the world to build in. And so we have to do everything, not just for affordable housing, but beyond that for general needs housing, to actually make it easier for applicants to come forward. And I'm particularly pleased, and I'm sure our colleagues like Councillor Portney and who serve on DC welcome the fact that officers and the planning service led by Simone Wilding have really knuckled down and addressed the backlog in the planning system over the last year or more. We've recruited many more graduate planners, and again recently I was impressed to see that there are changes to make it more efficient, like I believe Alex Hearn dubbed it making the case officer king, so it's not passed or decisions up the channel to their boss. The case officer will actually negotiate based upon planning policy, and in my view, the sooner, the quicker we can allow an applicant to put their shovel in the ground, metaphorically, the better. So I hope this council works collectively to achieve that.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, one on acquisitions and one on the IT system. So CRR 37 makes a couple of points on acquisitions. I think it says that for the HRA, I think it says we plan to buy 14, and it says that we're 57% complete in our purchase of 14. So I assume that means 8 houses, which is great. But keep going. And the general for one, it says up to 75 homes, which we're 5% complete, which I assume means 4 homes. I'm a bit slippery about the up to 75. So could I check that we are intending to buy 75?
Thank you, Councillor Logan.
I have to take it. We would like to buy 75, but it really depends on what's available on the market and the cost of them. One of the things I think that we're keen to do, particularly where we have challenges to invest in our homes, for example, is to target buybacks. So actually where leaseholders are currently selling homes within our blocks of flats, there's an opportunity to buy them back. They also tend to be good value for money, but they also have additional benefits for us in terms of our managing of those leasehold relationships. So the answer is we would like to buy back 75, but we are dependent, because it's a multi-year programme, it depends on the movement within the market. If the market were to drop, we might actually get more than 75. So I hope that is helpful.
Oh, steady on. Okay, that's really helpful, thank you. On something that came up in the public forum, so the CRR 60 on page 32 talks about the new IT system, which it says that is 25% complete, but was supposed to be here by March. So I'm not sure what 25% means in that context. So when will we hear a kind of revised timeline?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Logan. Sonia.
So we are currently grappling with the go-live date, and it's the backstop, I believe, is the 5th of September. But we would like to try and go live in August. We've still got some user acceptance testing to do, particularly in allocations, which is where the focus is currently, and we're also rolling out training. That's for phase 1. We then have phase 2, which is the critical bit in relation to this risk, which is really around the implementation of the asset modules in particular. And given the importance to us in terms of managing our risk, but also improving much needed improvements in terms of the quality of our homes, which is why this will have such an impact on that in terms of creating capacity, because what we're hoping at the moment, we have some systems which are very user heavy in terms of manual inputs. We're very reliant on spreadsheets. It causes concern around quality and reliability of data, which is why we're bringing somebody external in, not from NEC, not from the council, just to put some fresh eyes on it and to make sure we're focused on the right things so that we do go live on that September date and we deliver the entire system in time for October, which really is our absolute deadline.
Okay, thank you.
I do want us to pick up the pace a bit, because although we have a fairly light agenda today, we still have several items still to get through. I'm going to go to Councillor Gooch next.
Sorry, it was just a quick one. I was just in mind of a while ago, councillors had a briefing on co-living housing, and I was just looking at the sort of youth housing projects and also the issues that we have with approximately 800 van dwellers around the city, and I was just thinking whether or not we could look at the building some co-living spaces as well, to take for the single occupant spaces, so that we could address those issues as well, because obviously all the flats and things that we buy back are generally larger for families, but also co-living spaces would really help with the youth homelessness issues.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. So my understanding around co-living is that the council is currently in the process of developing a supplementary planning document, which would help regulate the provision of co-living. It's not generally considered an affordable housing product, so it's not generally something that this committee would spend very much time on, because our focus is on the provision of affordable housing tenures. That very often co-living, it tends to be aimed at a sort of section of the market that where people have options. And so it's not generally, I would think, something that we would look at as being an affordable housing solution for some of the issues that you've raised. That said, I think there are moves towards things like the provision of homes at local housing allowance rate that would not be managed by a registered provider. These might have impacts on the market and make it possible for people to access a home that where they otherwise wouldn't, you know, realistically have access through the home choice system. We don't currently have colleagues from the housing delivery team here who might be able to speak more on this, but I don't know if Sonia, is there anything that you would like to mention?
So we do commission services on the basis of co-living, because obviously, particularly for young people, so we commission a number of supported housing services, many of whom are co-living essentially. But we don't have many move-on options which replicate that co-living, other than in the private rented sector. It hasn't been a feature of our affordable housing programme, but I'm very happy to have a conversation with Louise, who's our head of service. And if you're interested in exploring it with her, I'm sure that she would be very happy to spend some time discussing it.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got time for one more before we move on. Would anyone like to make a point? Councillor Shabalala or Councillor Pane?
Yes, just looking at the risks, I think one of the core things is more about inaction in terms of making decisions about the estates. So I think it's really good to see that the thoughts of the asset management strategy coming through to kind of prioritize some of that decision making, as you mentioned, Sonia, about the garage spaces. I think that's, you know, we need to make some decisions, and I think residents would also welcome that. My question is more around our cross-committee working, because looking at the report, the adult service and children's service kind of commission working together to make sure that we are providing suitable accommodation and housing for those for adults and young people has got, you know, a two-way or a total budget saving for the administration. So how are we actually prioritizing that cross-party, sorry, not cross-party, well, that's good anyway, but cross-committee working to achieve mutual beneficial goals?
Thank you, Councillor Shabalala. Sonia, would you like to respond?
So in terms of the goals of the multiple committees, I think this is week 6. I've already had discussions with both children's services and adult services where we have opportunities to improve the way that we work, and there has already been, particularly with adult services, a lot of work around exempt accommodation, and both the strategic housing team led by Louise Davis have been working very closely with colleagues in adults, and who have commissioned services from Elim Housing, one of our registered providers, to develop exempt accommodation. And one of the things that we are currently looking at more broadly, particularly for children's services as well as adult services, is around the viability of the creation of a registered provider specifically to deliver more exempt accommodation, because it would significantly reduce the costs and improve the outcomes for young people and people with care needs who are adults.
Thank you, Sonia. I'd also say, I think that as chair of this committee, I've had joint briefings with the chairs of the adults and children's committees as well on different topics. They haven't necessarily been issues that have warranted a joint briefing to both committees or a joint session of both committees, but it's entirely possible that the kind of work that Sonia's talking about may lead to that in the future. Councillor Pulteney.
It was very quick, I hope, Chair. Sorry, one was just to say it's great to hear the cross-committee working and cross-party working, I'm sure. I have to admit it's been impressive to see the extent to which the Council hasn't fallen back into silos as we've moved into the committee system, but it's always good to see members from different committees working together and on the same things. And I think in this one particularly, economy and skills, because of its relationship to the planning policy process, but also, if at all possible, within the scope of planning law, where there is development that's intended to contribute or to help with our preventing homelessness strategy, I think councillors on DC would welcome any indications around that in the reports that are made to development control committees, because it would be such a useful thing to have. And very finally, if I may, just as a comment in relation to Councillor Peate's first question on a previous agenda item, and I can only speak for myself in respect of this, but I remember also being concerned when I first was involved in housing in the city in respect of the risk attitude to the housing revenue accounts annual outturn. And it's one of those things where it's one of those risks that absolutely needs to be borne in mind in the context of every other risk we're trying to manage. Almost everything that you do to try and manage the risk in terms of the account would worsen the risks in every other way. It's such a difficult one to balance when it's presented in this way. It's the best way of presenting it, but it's not until you see the corporate risk register as a whole that really becomes very apparent. So I thought I'd throw that out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Paulding. I think we'll take that recommendation about reports to DC committees away as well, won't we? I think it's probably worth mentioning at this point too that the corporate risk register, as I understand it, is going to be reviewed in the light of the newly adopted corporate strategy as well. So that work will be taking place. I'm going to finish with Councillor Eddy on this item.
Fair Chairman, you rather largely made the point I was going to make, but also we have regularly, the Chairman's weekly briefings, we regularly have either ward members or the Chairman of other policy committees invited, so there is dialogue and cross-fertilisation going on.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to move us on now. For the clarity of the committee and the benefit of members of the public, the recommendation of the report is that the Homes and Housing Delivery notes this report. Thank you. Agenda item 10 is the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme and Compliance Update. This report is to note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan Summary, on the Landlord Compliance Performance Report, to consider and approve the Housing and Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, and to note and comment on the residents' voice actions and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, as well as on the update on new and upcoming legislation and regulatory changes, as well as on the update from the latest regulatory review meetings with the Regulator of Social Housing. This is a non-key decision, but we are going to take a vote at the end on the Housing Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy. And I'm going to invite Richard James, who's the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Lead, to introduce and outline this report.
Hi, thank you, Chair. There's quite a bit in the paper, so I won't talk to all of it. What I will do is just summarise the different sections quickly, and then open up for questions if that's okay. Okay. The first item was the update on the improvement plan and programme delivery. Just to say that to date we've completed about 50% of the actions within the improvement plan since the programme's been running. The programme is currently on amber status, and the reason for that is because we're still working very hard on a few key areas, namely around damper mould and reducing our damper mould numbers, and also around delivery of fire remedial actions. I'll touch on those very briefly again in the next section. But overall, the number of actions, completed actions, is going up. So there's steady progress, but there is still key work to do. Other areas of focus are around what we've already discussed today, around the implementation of the NEC system, and this programme is very interested in the NEC reporting functionality to enable us to be able to effectively report to yourself on progress once the NEC system's going live. And there's been a task and finish group which is specifically focused on that, in addition to the things that Sonia's already mentioned. Also, just very briefly, I won't go into detail on it, but I think it's important to note, Sonia did mention the enhanced leadership capacity, and that is a really important part of the delivery and the success of this programme. So I would like to reiterate that, and there's been quite significant steps forward in that over the last couple of months. On the performance reporting, you'll be able to see from Appendix A2 that there's been good progress in gas, fire risk assessments, reduction, carbon monoxide detectors, lifts and Legionella. Areas that are still very much a focus are around damp and mould, where we're getting much better visibility and of the damp and mould cases we are and the severity of them and age of them, but the numbers are still quite high because there was quite an influx in early 2025, but that is a very big focus for the team and the new expanded leadership capacity. Fire remedial actions and response repairs are also key areas of focus. Underlying a lot of those areas is around data management, and again, that's a very big priority for Claire and her team. Just coming to the strategy, I won't go into it in detail, but the strategy really sets out our journey to first respond to the regulatory judgment, but then to meet all of the consumer standards, and as Sonia said earlier, to ensure that the services we provide meet the needs of our residents, which is equally as important to health and safety. So hopefully you'll see from the strategy that it outlines the key priority areas and the journey that we're on, and we've set out 4 key milestones, so stages for achieving the full compliance with consumer standards. The other thing I think just to pull out on that, I'm sure you'll have some questions on it, is that we want to make this strategy as accessible as possible to a range of audiences. So the way we've designed it is we've tried to make it as easily accessible as possible, but we've also designed it so that various areas can be pulled out of the strategy and presented as a standalone basis. And also we've almost completed an animation that we can put on our website and launch for people who really don't want to read through a 20-page document. The other 3 areas in the update are around residents' voice. I won't go into too much detail on that now. I know there's an item later on in the agenda to talk a little bit more about resident engagement. There's also a section on upcoming legislative and regulatory changes, and just to give a summary of where we're going and what we're looking at there. And there's an update on the engagement that we're having with the regulator of social housing. So I'd like to open up for questions.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to invite questions and comments from members now. Councillor Reddy.
Chairman, you'll be relieved I'll be mercifully brief, partly because, as I've said before, I have seen this a few times, in fact 3 times actually, and Chris, Richard. Although, Richard, you make no bones about the fact, and you're very frank of areas of slowness and difficulty, significant progress has been made, especially in electrical inspections, gas servicing, fire risk assessments, carbon monoxide detectors, etc. So I wanted to thank you and your team for the hard work which has been done. I've got one question, and perhaps you might want to defer to Craig, right? But you can answer. In para 1.6 of the report, you talk about the planned changes to the repairs maintenance service, and whilst you give some bare bones, they're really bare bones. Could you kindly flesh them out a bit to the committee?
Thank you, Councillor Reddy. Richard.
Yes, I'll probably hand over to Claire first, being the director of the whole property directorate.
I'm going to take us one step back. I'm very keen to understand what we have, our risks, and what we need to do to ensure that people are safe, warm, secure. Now, that is a work stream 1 of the Consumer Standards Programme. And I have not been working to the programme. I have been working to ensure that we get the correct level of service for our residents as quickly as possible. The barriers have been an awful lot of information is people led rather than process led. And whilst every time I have asked a question, people have been able to run around and give me the information, I want to move to an assurance model rather than a quality control model, so that in the fullness of time, we can have the level of assurance that I require as an officer, let alone the statutory level of assurance that the committee needs to hold me to. It's not an answer, I'm very sorry, but it is to try and explain where we are on this journey. We have the information. We are able to report on the information. The bit that's missing from my perspective is the assurance that you are starting to rightfully ask me for.
I think, Claire, what you're saying is, on this occasion, I'll have to be patient. There will be in a future report. I'm not very good at patience, but I'll try to be.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. I think Sonia wanted to come in as well.
So I think you were also asking around what are the specific changes we've made around the additional capacity. I think what Claire has done is brought in, so obviously we now have an executive director. We have Claire in role, who's leading on the property side. Craig was holding the mantle pretty much single-handedly, I think, previously in relation to property. We now have a head of repair and maintenance called Mark Williams, who joined us a couple of weeks ago. Craig is now focusing on compliance and on the delivery of our capital investment programme. And critically, we have another head of service, John Taphouse, who is focused on our data. He's our head of asset strategy. And so collectively, that's the kind of the additional capacity that we've brought in, because previously, really, for quite some time, it was Fiona and Richard Richard leading our improvement programme, essentially. So we have made significant investment in terms of the leadership.
Thank you. I think that helps to flesh out the answer to my question. I believe Fiona Lester was looking into the option of actually cloning Richard. That might have been a solution.
Thank you. Councillor Poultney?
One that should go on the risk register, Councillor. No, sorry. I just wanted to check that I was reading the data right in respect to the fire risk remedials on page 63. Apologies, I always find this when I see what is ostensibly three-dimensional information that covers time as well as level of risk. Is there movement in between the risk categories? As in, could something that is high risk and overdue by 3 months in March 25 have been something that was medium risk and overdue by less than 3 months previously?
Claire, would you like to respond?
This is something that is of interest to me as the person with the fire safety qualification in the room. I can assure you that we have taken a very risk-averse approach to the FRA actions. As I am reviewing the documentation, there are things that I would not have put as a medium risk, but because the external assessor has said it's a medium risk, we are reporting it as medium. So we are over-reporting at the moment. So that's been addressed by the recruitment, and we've offered to a very experienced former firefighter strategy person to be our fire safety manager, who will review that when they take up post, assuming they accept the offer in July, August.
Councillor Poultney, do you have a follow-up?
Oh yes, no, sorry, apologies. I might not have framed that particularly well. It wasn't so much in respect of of any specific concern. It was more to ensure that what this looks like to me, if it is the case that something can become a higher risk over time or a lower risk over time. I suppose, is there a possibility of duplication within it? It sounds like there are, because if it is the case that things can move between the graphs, this looks to me like a shock moving through the system and diminishing. If that's not the case, it looks different.
Thank you, Councillor Polly.
Yeah, with fire risk assessment, the fire risk assessment sets the severity of the action, so whether it's high, medium or low, basically. So the numbers don't shift over time for the fire risk assessment. It's based on what the fire risk assessor says. What Claire was saying is that at the moment we've got the fire risk assessor is very risk averse. So some of the actions they are categorising as higher aren't necessarily higher, and we're engaging with them regarding their categorisation of some of those risks, because we can't change the risk severity ourselves. It's got to be done in conjunction with the fire risk assessor. But yeah, the severity doesn't change over time.
Thank you. Claire.
I would like to highlight that a risk identified in fire risk assessment done last year sometimes reappears in the subsequent fire risk assessment. Those duplications have been removed. But I think I need to do a bit more work just to check that something identified last year as, say, low hasn't been re-identified this year as a medium or a high. So can I take that away, please?
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Logan.
I wanted to ask about stock condition surveys. They're really important things, and the strategy itself basically says that, and talks about having a greater quality of knowledge of our assets. So I want to ask about performance with doing them. I think the aim in the detail is to do 70% of the base by March 26 and 100% by 27. So that's it. So for clarity, is that the objective? And also, we seem to be making progress in that, but progress seems to be quite slow. So are you happy with the current progress, and do you think it's likely to accelerate? It seems like it would need to accelerate to meet those objectives.
Thank you. Richard?
Shall I take that? Yes, it is due to accelerate, and it has been accelerating. So we had a target of 30% of our homes to have a stock condition survey that is no more than 5 years old at the end of last financial year. We didn't quite achieve that. We did 6,000 surveys rather than 8 was the target. Within this strategy, what we've said is we're going to catch up this year, so that we're going to do 12,000 surveys this financial year and get to the 70% by March 2026 is what the strategy says, and then 100%, as you said, by March 2027.
So I appreciate it's slightly early in the year to know, but do you think you're on track for 12,000 this year?
Yes, yeah, we're confident that can be achieved. If we need to bring additional resource or additional contractor within, we will. Last year's programme, as you said, was a little bit slow. It didn't start till late summer. We've got the benefit this year of starting with a contractor in place and working on that. So we're in a much stronger position, but we're monitoring it closely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reddy.
Please, Chairman, I share Councillor Logan's attachment to the importance of stock condition surveys, but in the interest of historical accuracy, I have to remind him or tell him that they carried on until COVID, then naturally they stopped for a time for obvious reasons, social distancing, etc. But as Savills remarked, who looked at the state of our housing stock prior to the self-referral to the regulator, they never commenced again, and there's no excuse for that. And I'm afraid it is a matter of historical fact. The then cabinet member for housing was the current leader of the Labour group.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. I'm not seeing any other hands. Oh no, Councillor Gooch.
Sorry. Yeah, I just was asking about, I'm totally shocked that the council is still using spreadsheets to track everything. And I'm glad to see that there's a reporting a new program, NEC system. Could you tell me a bit more about it? Because in my day job, we started using like case report management systems like 10 years ago, and spreadsheets are just a nightmare. So please tell me more.
Yeah, so NEC is the new housing IT system that we discussed earlier in this meeting. Claire, would you like to describe it?
NEC has a series of modules. It has a module for homelessness, it has a module for rent, it has a module for housing management, it has a module for estates management, and most importantly for safe, warm and secure, it has an asset module, and the asset module will capture every single asset that we have on a block level right the way down to behind every front door. And that will allow us to refine our survey approach to a two-pronged approach, a block approach as well as a behind every door approach. And it actually allows us to capture information on quite a granular level. So we can report on the housing health and safety rating system, what the condition is of the components, because previously we have replaced components on how old they were. And I'm more interested in what is the condition and are they fit for purpose. So we have already moved away from spreadsheets because our current asset management system has the capacity to be updated by the stock condition surveys, because I don't like spreadsheets. I find them difficult to read, and they can fall over and people can amend them, and it's just not very good. But the main difference is that at the moment I'm having to use 5 systems to manage this on behalf of the council. NEC will actually allow us to put everything into one place, and it will give us the better levels of assurance. I have used NEC at a previous council, and there are foibles with the system. It's not perfect, but we will see significant reporting benefits when it is fully implemented.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-ups? Okay. I'm going to go to Councillor Shabalala next, and then if anyone else would like to speak, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move us on.
It's absolutely lovely to see the strategy. I think it's something I've been waiting for since I kind of came here, or even as a resident. To kind of see the detail that's been put onto this is fantastic. And again, Richard, seeing that what you're saying kind of confirms with Sonia's aspirations that we're moving and hoping towards C1. That is really, really positive, that we're not just aiming to just meet the standards, but to exceed on our standards. So I'm hoping that with that strategy, we're also thinking about the budget that's required to achieve those things alongside the long-term plan of doing that. Because something that kind of strikes me the most is when you look at the Equalities Impact Assessment, those living in social housing are 3 times most likely to be in food insecurity, 3 times most likely to have issues of managing finances, 3 times most likely to have health complications. So therefore, delivering the strategy does need cross-committee work. You can see public health being right at the forefront of that. You could also see our corporate property team being right in front of that, making sure that, where we have estates, we have, sufficient retailers that match our support future outcomes of residents versus those that can just be able to manage or afford that commercial rent. We need to really think on a place-based approach in order to address this kind of systematically, because when you look at those surveys of people's satisfaction, it is not that life is not going well. It is that the living conditions around them are not well suited or are strategically placed to enhance their life. And I think we have to think about the built environment in which our estates are in and the influence that we have in shaping that, and take a strong approach in influencing our cross-committee work to really think more strategically in order that we're not just meeting our commitments in housing, but we're also jointing it up with other committees, because clearly to meet our resident engagement and meet our equalities needs of those residents, we need to be working collectively. And I'm hoping to kind of see that kind of, in itself be really evident. So thank you very much for bringing the strategy. I'm sure residents will be quite happy to see the transparency. Thanks.
Thank you, Sibs. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the recommendations now then. What I'll do is I'll read out the recommendations, and then I'll ask us for a vote on recommendation 3. So the recommendations are as follows: that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan Summary, to note and comment on the Landlord Compliance Performance Report, consider and approve the Housing Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, note and comment on the Residents' Voice actions and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, note and comment on the update on new and upcoming legislation and regulatory changes, note and comment on the update from the latest regulatory review meetings with the Regulator of Social Housing. Okay, so I'm now going to ask for a vote on recommendation 3, and that is that we consider and approve the Housing Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, which is contained in Appendix A3. So all those in favour, please. Oh, yes, apologies. I need to move it first. So, yes, I move that. Yeah, thank you. And a second from Councillor Reddy. Thank you. So, can I have hands for those in favour, please? And can I confirm that that's unanimous? Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. So that's approved. Thank you. So, item 10, and we're on to agenda item 11, which is the formation of a resident and community panel. This report is to seek approval to form a new resident and community panel for housing and landlord services in place of the Housing Management Board. This is a key decision because it affects 2 or more wards. I'm going to invite Mark Kempt, who is Income and Rents Manager, to introduce and outline the report. Mark.
Hello, just want to correct you. I'm the interim head of housing and estates, and I'm as surprised as anyone else is. So thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. As set out, the purpose of this report is to seek approval to form a new resident and community panel for the housing and landlord services in place of the Housing Management Board. The Housing Management Board has operated for nearly 2 decades, comprising of Bristol City Council residents, leaseholders and councillors. The Housing Management Board last met in February 2024 before the Council's new committee system was introduced. In July 2024, an informal meeting was led by the Chair of Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to discuss the Housing Management Board's purpose and its relationship with the new committee system. It was agreed that the board needed to review a fresh approach to resident relationships. As part of the Housing Consumer Standards Programme, Bristol City Council must ensure that our residents can influence and scrutinise strategies, policies and services. The Council must seek and consider residents' views in decision-making and communicate how these views are integrated into service delivery. The purpose of the Resident and Community Panel will be to hold Bristol City Council through the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Board accountable for its landlord services, performance improvement and compliance with both the Regulator of Social Housing, the Social Housing Act 2023 and the Building Safety Act 2022. The panel will include up to 20 members, with 14 residence places and up to 5 non-resident members from community organisations. The panel may also include a co-opted role for a social housing expert or independent tenant advisor. The selection process will ensure fairness and transparency. The panel will focus on strategic priorities, engaging with senior leadership. 2, create a two-way dialogue with the council which is open and transparent. Monitor performance and progress on key areas of concern for our residents. Quality assurance, ensuring residents' voices are heard and impacts are considered. Influence decisions and improvement programmes within the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme. Influence communication and engagement strategies with residents, and provide accountability, holding Bristol City Council to account, ensuring residents' feedback is addressed, service performance improves, and critical safety issues progress. Residents can review progress and evidence against the national consumer standards. To keep residents informed, the panel will establish terms of reference and operate within transparency. A communication plan will ensure residents are updated on activities and outcomes, and regular progress updates will be provided through various channels, including housing forum meetings, committee meetings, the council's website, social media, and resident groups. Ongoing engagement activities will continue along with the resident engagement task and finish group. The resident and community panel will be reviewed after 2 years to assess the impact and alignment with resident engagement strategies. In summary, I'm asking for the committee to replace the Housing Management Board with a new resident and community panel and delegate any further decisions on the creation of the resident community panel to the Executive Director of Housing in consultation with the Chair of Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm now going to invite members of the committee to ask questions or make any comments they'd like to, and I'm going to start with Councillor Al-Maghrabi.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask if this panel will be cross-party, and I also wanted to ask if the representative will be invited to future homes and housing delivery committees to give us updates on their progress and to contribute to the voice of the local residents. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Al-Maghrabi.
Sure, that's all right.
So I think I can provide some brief answers on those, but then I'm going to hand over to Mark. So, I mean, on the first one, you asked whether this panel will be cross-party. I mean, it will be non-partisan. This is a panel that's intended to represent residents and their interest, and it's going to be largely comprised of residents in our homes, along with community organisations and as Mark has described, expert support, independent support. So, and I think on the point about interactions with this committee, I would expect that this panel will have an intimate relationship with this committee. I would expect that members of this panel will be regularly attending this meeting and will be involved in the decision pathway in quite an active way. Mark.
I don't have much more to add other than I think one of the things we really want to do is lean on our relationships with other community organisations because they've already got that engagement with our residents, and we want to ensure that we're tapping into that knowledge base.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Eddy, and Several hands.
I think I am unique, but then I am unique in many ways in having served on the Housing Management Board since it was created in 2008, I believe, by Councillor John Keeley, because he wanted to give tenants greater say about policy and performance. As I often jokingly remark about the 33 years since I was elected to Bishopsworth, even mass murderers now serve less time. But seriously, clearly the governance structure has moved massively since then. We were leader in cabinet, moved to the mayoral system, now to the committee system. We used to actually have on the old housing committee some 2 tenant representatives. Personally, I think exposing them to members full time is a mistake. I think actually the residents and tenants panel proposing is far more sensible. I like the proposal. I do personally admit I think the HMB had served its time. It was no longer really fit for purpose. So we should have far broader and diverse inputs into the new structure. I like the idea of an independent chairman or chairman lady, and certainly paid tenants advisor, of course, to assist our tenants. So this commands my full support.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Councillor Russell?
Yeah, hi. I would be interested in knowing how you plan on recruiting these residents. Obviously, you said about tapping into local community groups. Which ones that might be. And also ensuring that we find a diverse representation, whether that covers young people, people of colour, disabled people, queer, trans people, minoritized groups specifically, and also what incentives might be available. I know that there was a section on potential incentives and transport, but obviously certain minoritized groups are less likely to engage with the council and are less likely to have the resources to be able to. So making sure that all of that is thought about. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Lisha, and I'm the Policy and Engagement Manager. A lot of the detail of the recruitment is yet to be developed. However, what I can say in support of this proposal is that we would be working with residents. We have about 1,000 residents already on our involvement register, and we've got the ability to communicate quite broadly with all of our tenants. So it would be making sure that we communicate what we're doing, inviting people to express an interest to play a part in the panel, should they wish to do so. In terms of community groups, we know of quite a few community groups who are providing housing advice to council tenants in local areas. I'm not going to name them all here, just for fairness, but we certainly have seen some of those come. We're either working in partnership with them already, or they've approached us to make representation on behalf of tenants. So we'll be looking across the city, but we will be looking at where our properties are, the catchment and for those community groups, and what sort of housing advice they're giving, and helping to using that data to help us decide which organisations to invite to come on board and to express an interest. Just one more point in terms of inclusivity. Partly the reason we're inviting community organisations on board is because we recognise that tenant participation isn't for everyone. People have busy lives and people have quite chaotic lives sometimes, but their voice still matters. And there are people that they trust who they're already engaging with, who hopefully will be able to make representation in terms of sort of key themes that are coming up for marginalised groups, and sort of build support that way.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say we've had some positive conversations with groups already, so. I'm hopeful it will transfer.
Thank you. Councillor Gooch, next.
Actually, I think Izzy's asked most of my question. I was going to ask about how we're going to make sure people from underrepresented groups are included. Digitally excluded was the other thing that I had. Also, what training and support will be made available to members to help them understand regulatory frameworks and how to interpret performance data, brief them on housing policy, etc.
So there's national training programs. There's the 4 Million Homes Project, which is a national training scheme for social housing tenants up and down the country. They provide free training. So we're definitely thinking of partnering with them around what courses they can offer, and then any specific training courses we would make funding available. We are also members of TPAS, which is the Tenant Participation Advisory Service. They also provide lots of training and courses for residents, but also for staff and for councillors as well. So we'll be tapping into those resources to make sure we get the right training for the members.
Thank you. Councillor Pete.
So recently a resident reached out who lives in Gilton House in one of the blocks that has suffered from poor fire safety and botched jobs. And it's now come to my attention that residents can no longer view the fire risk assessments as the council has withdrawn access. This seems somewhat at odds with the purpose of this panel, so I was wondering if you could commit to making sure that these reports are made available for residents.
Thank you, Zoe. It's not directly relevant to this paper, but could we get a response about fire risk assessments briefly?
I can talk generally. The property safety strategy, which is going to come to the committee very shortly, one of the key areas being explored is accessibility of health and safety information for residents, because we've been aware that there's not been a clear position on this. But in that I don't want to preempt that strategy, so I'm not leading on it, but that will very much give a very clear position on information available to residents. But I think the desire is to be as transparent as possible.
Thank you.
Is it possible I can get a timeline for when these reports will be available?
The strategy is coming to the committee in the summer, so I think it's July.
It is July, yeah. So it's probably best
there'll
to
be
ask
some
those
clarity.
questions then.
Perfect.
There'll be clarity then.
Thank you. Councillor Pulteney next.
Thank you. Sorry, I appreciate it as a newcomer again. It's maybe a silly question. I was just looking, obviously, in terms of the next steps and milestones, the Housing Management Board would be disbanded in June, but the first meeting of the new panel will be in November. I was just wondering what, A, why the reason for that gap, and B, what interim measures might be in place.
So the Housing Management Board, as it stands, although it's not met since February 2024, does need to be disbanded. So we will be writing to the existing members to let them know that it no longer exists if the decision today is to progress with the new panel. Between June and November, what we'll be working on is the recruitment, working up the terms of reference for the panel, looking at those incentives and the training programme, and starting to develop those things. So we just need some lead-in time before we start recruitment to kind of get our ducks in a row and be able to make an offer out to residents who are interested, that is sensible, that they can understand, and that they are motivated to want to join. So we're going to be doing the development work in that time.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands. Councillor Shabalala.
Yeah, I think looking at the risk register, we also haven't attended the training about compliance and the regulator. So I think we need to also revisit our own understanding, because we were at 10% there. So that will also help in terms of making sure that residents are aware, that we are more aware. So I'd really welcome a reschedule of that training if possible. And yeah, looking at the equalities impact assessment, I think we need to use that to reflect what the future panel could look like, as someone who has been on the previous board as a tenant. And I always join the tenant meetings or the repairs meetings just to kind of still hear resident voices myself. I understand the importance of this work. What was mentioned really about that 4,000, is it 400? 400 million? 4 million? Yeah, homes. I think we really need to see this engagement as also a development opportunity for some of our residents based on the equalities kind of indicators, that what is the trajectory or support in enabling them to be more involved in housing, in paid opportunities through that TPAS, the training that they provide, being really advocates and so forth. So I'd really welcome that opportunity so that residents, before that whole recruitment process, whilst in that recruitment, there is clear training opportunities for them. That would be really good. On the other hand, thinking about the recruitment strategy and the membership is really important that we think about all the different catchments where you have estates. And it's not just about the people that shout the loudest. At times, maybe, mind me saying, it may not necessarily also be about representation, but it may at most be about who the residents within those estates feels represents them too. Because there's nothing worse than having a high-rise block, someone who says, I represent the block, but they absolutely do not represent the block. And therefore we have a mismatch of someone who says that they represent the block and the block saying that no, they don't. So I think we need to really make sure that this panel is people off the block, not just people that speak about the block, but people off the block that are supported by the residents, and they have the residents' ears, and therefore when they are on the panel, they're really speaking really reflectively about the block and also about the whole kind of opportunity. But again, that takes considerable capacity. So we need to think about their own capacity and how we kind of resource that. I think that's really quite important, so that we have not just the panel, but how do all these different panels also speak to each other? You know, a network, social housing network. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sibs. Just on your initial point about training for this panel, we did for this committee, we did organise some training through an external provider earlier this year on the consumer standards. Not everyone on the committee attended that, and I'm conscious that we've got some new members now, so I think it would be appropriate to look to rerun that.
I think that'd be really good. We did also do a recording of that, which I think Rose has distributed to members, but if you'd like that redistributed, we can do that.
Thank you, Rich.
Before we have a new session.
And on to Mark to respond on the point about recruitment.
Yeah, I think I've spent the last, as you know, 12 months getting out and about to meet residents, and we have a lot of engaged people already, and it's about how we can get them to, because I think there's some trepidation about getting involved in something this big, but we do have some really great residents who I think would be fantastic for this. I think there's a part for us to play around going out and having conversations with people to sort of say, look, you know, this is something you could really do well and make a difference in. So that's something Leisha and I will take away. And the other thing I just wanted to share was that I've had conversations with other RSLs, registered social landlords, and they are really interested in our approach. So there's going to be a separate, I don't know what it is yet, but I've got to sort something out with the National Housing Federation and the other RSLs we talked about, because they would like to find out how this is working and learn from us on that. So I think that's really positive for the city as well.
Thank you. Sonia would like to come in as well.
I just want to guard against having too unrealistic expectations of the residents who are kind enough to give their time to this panel. So essentially, I don't think we're looking for people who represent their blocks per se, because actually that's an incredibly big ask, because people can have a range of different experiences. I think what we're looking for are people with lived experience of living in our homes and receiving services from us. And so the broader thing around consulting more widely and holding sessions is really the role of the VCIT, the voluntary representatives on the group, the professionals, if you like, who work within the communities. So we certainly want them to be engaging with their neighbours, and we would certainly encourage our resident representatives to be engaging with their neighbours, but I think it's unfair and unrealistic to have them an expectation that they represent people. They are there for their expertise in terms of the fact that they live in our homes and they receive our services.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Reddy and then Councillor Pulteney, and I haven't seen any other hands, so I think we'll move to a vote after that.
I'm conscious you're itching to move to item 12, Chairman, so I promise I will be very brief. Just piggybacking Seb's request about training, if we have training or even briefings obviously into the committee structure, there's more briefings. We had the one actually on St Jude's very recently, and that worked because, in my view, consideration was made to giving it and scheduling it when members could be present. You'll remember a few months ago we had a very important feedback with Savills about their work, of course, on the housing stock, and that we were all invited. But it was mid-afternoon and only yourself, myself and Councillor Cock could be there. So I think it's important we do carefully consider the timing.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good point. It also occurs to me, following on from what Richard said, that we are sort of in the process of building up something of a repository of training and briefings for members, which we should probably make sure is available in an accessible form. Councillor Pulteney.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I hope a quick one, but my recollection is that the Housing Management Board, at least in its sort of latter stages of it, had councillors actively sitting on it, which hadn't been the case once upon a time when it was first formed. And I just wanted, one was to mention the work of a councillor who's been gone from this place quite a long time, but Councillor Cheryl Ann, who formerly represented Hallfield, who did a tremendous amount to facilitate and to ensure that the voices of our council house residents were heard in the governance of the governance arrangements for our council estate. And the other was just to say that it would be, I think, a great shame if that connection were lost. There's always been a very, I think, healthy relationship in the latter stages of the HMB, whatever else its failings might have been, that councillors from all parties were required to be there to know what those conversations that were happening, and as brilliant, and I'm so pleased to see this. I think this represents such a huge step forward for how we engage with these residents. I would want to make sure that members continue to be held to account from all parties collectively as a corporate body, rather than just this committee or yourself as chair. It really is a corporate responsibility that we have to these tenants, and I hope that link can be preserved in some way formally. Thanks.
Thank you, Guy. Councillor Reddy.
I promise to be brief. I will. I'd just like to caution against that. Hopefully, if I'm sure you'll promise your commitment to ensuring there's a real close dialogue with the residents panel and tenants panel happens, that we'll have free input to both ways, of course. But I wouldn't want to actually expose the tenants to actually councillors as bad enough for the officers. I don't think our tenants deserve that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, I think it's very important that this panel has a strong relationship with our committee, and that it's able to make representations to this committee and inform the decision making that we make. But also, I think we all have a role as councillors and as members of this committee to represent the needs and the views of council tenants in our own wards and across the city, and I think that's an important part of the function of what we do here. I'd like to move us on, if that's all right. As I said earlier, this is a key decision. So I'm going to read out the recommendation in the report, and then I'm going to call for a vote. So the recommendation is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approves to replace the Housing Management Board with a new Resident and Community Panel and delegate any further decisions on the creation of the Resident and Community Panel to the Executive Director for Housing in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. I'd move that recommendation. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Reddy, thank you. Let's go to a vote then. So could those in favour please raise your hands? Thank you, and I think that's unanimous, isn't it? Great, thank you very much. So that recommendation is approved. Thank you. So we're moving on now to agenda item 12, and that is an update on St Jude's refurbishment plans. This report is to advise the committee of the recent report's findings for St Jude's blocks, to provide information on recent decisions taken under delegated authority to initiate a break clause in the existing major refurbishment contract, to advise the committee of the commencement of completion of immediate and medium-term recommended actions within the reports, to advise the committee of recent decisions taken under delegated authority to approve securing specialist advice subject to all normal governance procedures, to complete the whole life asset costing of the St Jude's blocks in light of this new information by March of 2026. This is a non-key decision, and I'm going to invite Craig Cook, Head of Capital Works and Special Projects, to introduce and outline this report. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to meet colleagues who I've not met before. So I'll start with some background information on the blocks at St Jude's. Major refurbishment was awarded to a contractor in 2023 for 5 blocks, although the reports cover 4 of the blocks, and we'll cover some of that in a minute. The 5 blocks were John Cousins House, Haviland House, Langton, Charlton and Tyndall House. The construction type of the blocks was identified to be LPS, or large panel systems, in 4 of the blocks, and another one is a poured in concrete situ structure. The contract was split into 2 phases, phase 1 being the structural and fire risk assessments, phase 2 being the refurbishment works based on phase 1 findings. So the survey findings indicated that the 4 blocks that were large panel system type were John Cousins, Haviland, Langton and Charlton, with Langton being separate, being an in situ reinforced concrete frame, and Tyndall was not included because it's a separate block outside of it. So the blocks are linked and their fire escapes are linked. There's a physical connection between them. That's important when we address the defects found in the reports. So the indications from the reports carried out by independent structural engineering practice was across different criteria. So importantly, the structural strength analysis, which is based on BRE assessments, the building research establishment, and that's to assess the strength of the structure across 3 criteria. 1 being adequate ties of the building, make sure it's tied together properly in the horizontal and the vertical frames. And then you move through the different criteria on a hierarchy. So you start with the adequate ties. If you don't pass that test, you move through into strength loading, which means can it resist strength loading in different locations. If you don't pass that test, you move down, can the building withstand alternative load paths if it loses a supportive wall. So it's the details in the report, as you can see in the table, but I'm summarising. Now, Langton passed the first test, so it didn't move into the next test, wasn't required because it was a poured in concrete situ. However, the other buildings, due to their LPS structure type, failed in different areas and different parts. And all the details in the report, but Charlton is slightly different, which is why it's only partially passed because it's got a masonry wall. But overall, the buildings were insufficient in the structural assessments. Moving through into the fire resistance, they were built to bylaws at the time of a 60-minute fire resistance. However, desired fire resistance now would be looking to get to 90 minutes. Carbonation is weakening of the concrete as a result of water penetration into the structure of the concrete and effectively rusting of the robustness ties. So rusting makes them expand, which pushes concrete out. Also, inadequate ties to external walls within the concrete frame of the building. So they need to be tied together both to the frame and to each other. And then balustrades that were corroded out on walkways, so as a fall risk. So within the reports for each of the blocks and an executive summary, there is immediate, medium-term and long-term actions being recommended to Bristol. I'll go through some of those briefly. Immediate actions being evacuation strategy amendment, gas supply removal, scaffold erection, balustrade improvements, further inspections, concrete surveys, wind analysis to assess for adequate ties, and a fire detection system. Medium term being sprinkler protection, further balcony repairs, escape walkways, and masonry wall support. And then over a longer term period, further in visual inspections dependent on what we do on the immediate and medium term, full appraisal of the asset and structural upgrades and or potential for demolition. So the current mitigations that Bristol's already taken is the fire evacuation strategy has been amended and changed to a get out. The gas supply has been completely removed. The scaffold has been erected at the bottom parts of it to stop from concrete falling and further spalling. Balustrades where were severely corroded have been already temporarily repaired in the worst locations. Tenancy audits are started and will be ongoing. Concrete surveys are in progress, as is wind analysis, and now the fire detection system is being planned to be completed within a 6-month window. So we've also consulted with Avon Fire and Rescue on our approach. There is a statement within the information that's on the websites, but I'll draw you just to a sentence within a paragraph. We would like to assure residents that we have seen the reports and support the decisions taken by Bristol City Council and the mitigations they have put in place, including the continuation of the simultaneous evacuation strategy and wake-in watches. So 2 options were presented through the governance pathway. Option 1 being pause the major refurbishment works whilst we look at doing a strengthening analysis and a cost-benefit analysis and design of what that strengthening works would look like on top of the medium and medium-term actions. The opportunity of that is there's long-term use, improved living conditions and sustainability. However, there would be the risk being compensation events, financial uncertainty and resident dissatisfaction at pausing the major refurbishment that was committed to. The timeline of this would extend over to April 26. Option 2 would be to initiate the break clause in the contract, complete the immediate and medium-term actions, as well as look at the whole life asset appraisal of St Jude's through specialist support. The opportunity being it would improve living-based standards, energy efficiency and potential mixed tenure. However, there is a risk for reputational damage on the delayed refurbishment and resident dissatisfaction, whichever option is taken. So the next steps, the decision has been taken to pause the major refurbishment works to prioritise structural and fire safety using the budget that was approved in the Housing Investment Plan. Residents have been informed. There is a presence on site and will continue to be a presence on site both from Tenancy Management Service and from the Repairs and Maintenance Service. The residents have fed back that they'd like to see that more structured, which we will take into consideration and build that into future plans. There's a dedicated website and email address where people can contact residents, councillors or anyone with an interest, and that will be responded to. There's a live frequently asked questions document that's been generated for normal questions you'd expect to see, and that will be updated if there's any more that come in. Residents can expect to see contractors on site now as we mobilise for the immediate actions over the next 6-month period, namely the fire alarm installation, concrete repairs and tenancy audits. Thereafter, we will look to do the medium-term actions over the next 2 years, which will also coincide with budget resetting and budget profiling for next year. Thereafter, we'll look to do the specialist whole-life asset appraisal and costing in consideration for all of the findings now as a result of Phase 1 structural and fire risk assessments. So the decision has been taken through delegated authority to the Exec Director of Growth and Regeneration at the time in consultation with the committee chair. The budget was approved, as I said, in the Housing Investment Plan. Legal implications have been checked in the contract through our legal support team, so we can confirm that the route taken is compliant, and we will continue to do so and follow the governance pathways for any key decisions that are required.
Thank you, Craig. Now I'd like to invite the committee to ask any questions or make any comments they would like to. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you. what can be done to ensure residents will be engaged in shaping the options and understanding the implications during the development of the whole life cost and viability study, and how often will the interim safety measures be reassessed for residents over the next 12 to 18 months?
Thank you very much, Caroline. Shall we start with the second question about how often the safety measures will be reassessed, and then we'll go on to the first?
Yeah, absolutely. So some won't need to be assessed because they'll be completed and signed off. Others, such as the fire alarm, will be installed but then maintained on a weekly basis, a monthly, on a cyclical cycle, silly way, planned cycle.
Great, thank you. And then on the first point, I think, Claire, would you like to comment on this first of all?
It's very important that we take the time to explain what is happening with residents. We've adopted a sort of one-on-one approach, and Craig started to outline the routes to information. We had to remove the critical safety issues which Craig's identified, and we do have to do the medium and the longer term issues to ensure we maintain people's safety and the integrity of the building. So whilst I don't have a full programme of when we are going to do it, we do have a very detailed resident engagement strategy for these projects, and the status is that if there is a substantive change or a milestone or an options appraisal, we will consult.
Do you have a follow-up on that, Councillor Gooch?
Yeah, I think I'm just conscious that obviously people are going to have in their head Barton House and worry if there's all this work that needs to be done, are we going to at some point just be woken up at some point and told you have to move? So I just want to make sure that obviously that's really managed and we're not going to get into that situation when we have to have an emergency evacuation.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gooch. Claire, would you like to respond on that?
We have taken external validation for the approach from emergency services, and also we're in constant communication with our audit, insurance and risk management team. If I'm going to be overly simplistic, we ensured we had the full facts, and I am personally assured that if one of my family lived there, they would be safe. It's not going to suddenly fall down, but we have to take these actions in a measured and appropriate way, which is why at any change in actions or any options or milestone, we have to ensure that residents understand why. And in addition to that, Mark's team is already sort of engaging with residents on a one-to-one basis, saying what are your personal concerns, and that's why we've got the FAQs, so that we can build up a sort of notice of how people are feeling, so that we can actually involve people.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Sonia to come in on this point as well.
Thank you. Just in relation to giving assurance that people can be safe, I think the important thing is that, you know, we've had credible, qualified individuals have a look at what's happening within the building. They've also reviewed and made recommendations in terms of the actions that we should take. We've had further third-party assurance in terms of Avon Fire and Rescue, who are the appropriate authority. But critically, all of that then needs to be communicated with our residents in a way which gives them assurance. And that's really the purpose of having both technical colleagues and our housing officers on site on a regular routine basis, so that we can offer one-to-one assurance to residents. We went out with the communications on this some weeks ago, actually, and we haven't had a huge response from residents within the blocks in terms of having real concerns for their safety. So it would seem that the messages are landing well. I think your point's really important, though, in terms of the option appraisals, in terms of the long term here, because yes, we have to look at the property. So, you know, what can we do in terms of the building? What's the value for money elements of that? How much will it cost? What will it deliver? It won't fundamentally change some of the challenges in the building, such as having been in the flats, they're quite small. So understanding residents' experiences of living in those homes and what they want will be really critical to determining what we do as part of the outcome of that option appraisal. The building is just a part of it. Residents' views is, you know, just as important, if not more important.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'd add as well that that this is something that we really need to grapple with, you know, across all of our estates. And you know, we have an ageing estate. And this is something that this committee is going to have to get very, very deeply involved in as time goes on. I'm going to go to Councillor Pete next.
Thank you. So, like Councillor Gooch, I was reminded of Barton House too when reading about this. All but one of the criteria are marked as either insufficient or partly insufficient, and yet it was deemed appropriate for the residents to remain in these buildings. I would like to know why there is one standard for one and a different one for another. Could someone please explain the difference between these two estates? Because so far, without that implication, without that clarity, the implication is that either the council believes the residents of St Jude's deserve to live in a building with insufficient fire safety, or that the council essentially evicted the residents of Barton House needlessly.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Craig, would you like to respond on that?
Yeah, it's not quite as clear cut as that. Every building needs to be taken into consideration for the elements within said building. And interestingly, even just looking at St Jude's, everyone expected to see the LPS traditional type building. It's not a fully traditional LPS. But actually, well, bang in the middle, then Langton was a poured in concrete situ frame. So it's very interesting in different ways buildings are put together. Barton House, parts of Barton House were poured in concrete situ frames, like the outside flank walls. So when the intrusive surveys were carried out in more depth at the time, rather than just the 3 that were completed up to the 10, that changed learning at the time. So we can't just draw the comparisons. So this has to focus on what the reports say about these 4 blocks and what the recommendations are over the periods of time from the independent structural engineering practice.
Thank you, Craig. Do you have a follow-up?
So, just in case there are potentially, if the property is, or the properties are not sufficient, that is what it says, but the residents are staying there. So is there going to be any case of rent reduction while they're there? Is there going to be any form of compensation? Because there's an argument to say that these homes are not fit for human habitation. So is there going to be any rent reduction while they stay?
Thank you, Councillor B. Claire, would you like to respond?
The homes are safe to occupy. Because we have proceeded at pace to do the immediate mitigation. The homes do not meet current building control standards, but building control standards are not retrospective. However, I recognise that people have a right to feel safe, warm and secure in their own homes. Had we had independent professional advice to evacuate, that is what we would have done. We have not had that advice. Instead, we have a programme of works to ensure we maintain people in a safe environment.
So, sorry, just one final comment, which is that, so in the meantime, residents are going to be paying full price for a property that does not have full fire safety resistance.
Residents are paying rent for a building that was built in accordance with the building regulations apparent at the time of construction. We are looking to enhance those. The full rent represents a premises which it is safe for people to remain in.
Thank you, Claire. Sonia, did you want to come in?
Just to re-emphasise that point, actually, is that there has been no change in the amenity in terms of actually the mitigating actions that have been taken pretty much immediately as soon as we became aware of challenges within the building. So we have no plans to reduce rent.
Thank you. Councillor Reddy.
Realistically, many of us view option 1 as really not a valid or viable option. So I fully endorse selecting option 2. I also endorse what officers have done to date and also the way forward. So that's this is a helpful report in my view. Finally, I just had, as you as committee knows, I would find it utterly impolite to make party political jibes, but perhaps if there's a different standard being applied now to Barton House, maybe because Labour were in charge and we have a different administration now. Who knows?
Thank you, Councillor Reddy. Councillor Shabalala.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be useful, and I understand the challenges, and therefore it's good that we're working towards addressing these challenges. But clearly, they are here with us now, and looking at the equalities impact assessment is more for ward profile versus the bespoke kind of tenancy profile. So we see the urgency of having up-to-date tenancy profiles. And I would urge that we kind of move more towards a non-voluntary entry of tenancy profile data, but to more mandatory one, because when situations like this arise, we're not able to act effectively, we're not able to act strategically, and we're not able to provide the reassurance to our residents because there's limited data. There's options of either putting in the data or getting involved or not getting involved. But when decisions like these or allocations have to take place, we need to understand the needs of the families, of the individuals, ages. All of that matters. And if we continue with this voluntary approach, when situations come, we will not be able to address them in the most appropriate and strategic way where we can. And that means the residents will be putting themselves at risk. So can officers and Chair kind of think about the approach towards our tenancy profile being more mandatory versus voluntary? My second one, Sonia, is something that I know you stand for, and I'd like to see it within this, because within these equalities impact assessments, you have gone really deep in terms of the contractual obligations and how you work with contractors. What I don't see is how we're able to actually utilize our buying power through our social value and making sure that this situation is dealt with on a bespoke approach, not about taking on apprenticeships, not work placements, not any of that stuff, but something that deals with the immediate situation at hand. And that means we need to really be bespoke and use innovation partnerships, which is at our gift, in which we are able to address contractors. You know, going with a basic approach would not help and will not be sufficient, and will obviously mean that we end up using more of our purse than using our purchasing power. This is where this makes a big difference, and I'd like to see this big difference being implemented in the contractual spending that we're going to be utilizing in this estate. My final one is that for the benefit of the residents, I think we need to really think about our local allocations policy, where we have situations like these so that we don't cause major displacement of families moving apart, communities breaking apart, breaking those family ties, creating larger isolation. We need to really think about a local allocations policy where there is local developments like the Froome Gate. You know, how will these residents benefit from that Froome Gate development, from Broadmead development, and so forth? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shabalala. I think Sonia wanted to come back on you had three main points about tenancy data, social value, and local lettings.
So on our residents' data, I think the important thing for me is that we make every contact count. And so I'm spending time listening to our resident calls actually coming into us here, because that's the main way in which our residents engage with us, is via the phone. And I think there's more that we can do there to actually be capturing data, just checking people's email addresses, their communication preferences. At the point of allocation, I think we have improved. We are now collecting more routinely information around who we're moving into our homes. The challenge is, I think, where we have residents who are long-standing tenants in our homes, and it's difficult to compel people. You know, legally we can't compel people. What we can do is encourage. And I think particularly in St Jude's, where we are doing tenancy audits, I would expect, and I'm sure Mark will confirm this is the case, is that we are trying to capture as much resident data there, because you are absolutely right. If we're going to deliver great service, we need to understand who's living in our home so that we can tailor that service to their individual needs. On the point in relation to social value, I agree. I suppose this is the simple answer. So I think where we have individual works which are inconveniencing the residents living in that block, we should be targeting the social value at benefiting those individuals, and we should be working with the residents and indeed our community networks, who, you know, we have community development workers who work in a range of our areas who understand the needs of that community, so that we are tailoring the social value. I think the challenge is sometimes, you know, when you just add sums to contractors, all they do is they just add it to the price. So I think the route that we have predominantly taken is the delivery of opportunities or doing work. But I think certainly it's something that Craig can take away as part of the procurement process, to see how can the residents in St Jude's benefit from the procurement opportunity here. And the last one, I think, was about the allocations policy. I don't know the answer to that. I can certainly take it away in terms of looking at the opportunities. But what I would say, I think that actually, given that we have to think again in terms of doing a full option appraisal here in St Jude's, it would not make sense to do that in isolation. There is already a big regeneration scheme in Frome Gateway, which is right on the doorstep of St Jude's, because the point is really important around community displacement. I think where housing organisations have made mistakes with regeneration in the past, it's that they have underestimated the importance of community. Who you live next door to, where your children go to school, where your networks are, is really critical. Linking it to a wider regeneration programme could give us an opportunity to look at phasing, so that you develop, you decant, you then demolish and redevelop. So I think looking at the round in terms of what other regeneration is happening around our homes presents an opportunity to us to look at that.
That will be such a fresh perspective, and more than welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pulteney, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. It was very tempting when you're looking at one of these papers to look at, obviously because of the way that these papers have to be structured, to look at option 1 and option 2 and compare the two, rather than look at both in relation both to each other, but also in terms of the actions that have already been taken, the actions that are timetabled. And it's only when you look at all of those documents in that way that you get a sense of the Council's priorities. I'm hugely relieved to see, as I would expect, but of course, hugely relieved to see such an emphasis on resident safety and prioritising the residents in terms of immediate actions. That's really gratifying to see. And I would just stress, obviously for the record, but in terms of the comparison between the two properties that we just had, the technical overview of the reports and risks identified on page 160 of the report, I don't think it's unfair to assume that was all true before. It's just that now we know, now we're doing something about it, and that's again something we have to recognise when we're looking at these. I can't think of a committee or an area of the council that's had to respond to so many, let's say, so much new information over the last year, and just finally to express my support as well, alongside Councillor Ellis, for the decision that the chair made. I would wholly stand by that. I think that was exactly the right thing to do. in this context, and just to say that also one of the benefits of the new committee model that we're working under, of course, is that this isn't a decision that's made in Cabinet and then might come to scrutiny at some point, but one where it automatically comes to a committee of councillors to review as soon as it's happened. And I think that can only be good for our decision-making process. It's great to see it happening in action.
Thank you very much. And that brings us nearly to the end of our meeting. So for the clarity of the committee and the benefit of members of the public, the recommendation in this report is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes the report. Thank you. The next Homes and Housing Delivery Committee meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Friday the 18th of July 2025. And that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much.
Did we have to approve that last item?
No, it's just for noting.
Great.
Thank you.